Part 11. Why is God so hidden?
Question number 11. Why is God so hidden? God could have written on every animal made by God. He could have ran for president, or spell Yahweh in the stars. However, we are the ones who set the conditions for which God is to reveal himself. Who are we to do this?
Ah, yes. Instead of answering the question, let's just dodge it. Who are you to question the thing that I'm saying that actually exists, because that thing is just so great and amazing and awesome and wonderful and powerful? How dare you question it? That makes it completely unfalsifiable. Here the king is. Who dare question the king? Saying that his new outfit is beautiful. Everybody agrees. As he walks the street, everyone comments on how beautiful his new outfit is. Except for a young kid who says, "King, why are you naked?" Everyone turns and looks at the kid. They look back at the king. He is indeed naked. And yet, they dare not question him. Because he is the king. Then he has the kid executed. Okay, that's not the story that's originally told about that, but basically that's what's going on, right? But in this case, the king is also invisible, and also there's no evidence that there's a king, or a kingdom, or a crowd, or a kid, or anything at all.
It is no wonder why it is not so apparent to some, because they set up the standard and will ignore anything that is not to that standard.
So here's this guy, you might have heard of him, Uri Geller, but his actual name is James Heidick. And he makes this claim that he can move things with the power of his mind. One of those things happened to be the pages of a telephone book. He opens it and he moves some of the pages of the telephone book. Good old James Randi comes along, and he does something very simple. He puts some packaging peanuts around the telephone book. And lo, suddenly and mystically, magically, he cannot move the pages of the telephone book. Oh, see, it was unfair of James Randi to require him to do that. You see, the packaging peanuts reflected the light energy from the lights in the studio on the peanuts, and that made it impossible for his powers to work anymore. So see, that was very unfair. Without those peanuts, he would have been able to do it just fine. It's just terrible that Randi had this high expectation of him. How dare he question this man and put those peanuts there?
There are at least 3 main points that need to be brought up. The premise that God is hidden is something I dispute, and he is apparently hidden to some. First.
So wait, you dispute it, but it's apparently actually true anyways. Why would you dispute it if it's true? I don't understand. You're saying it's not true then? Or is it only sometimes true? What are you saying?
Romans 1 and 2 argues that everyone has sufficient evidence for a rational belief in God.
And so now you need to prove that the book is true, but that doesn't matter because the thing doesn't have the proof. So the book is obviously wrong. There isn't any evidence of this thing. Otherwise, I wouldn't be asking for it.
We know that God exists through the evidence in creation, such as the fine-tuning of the universe.
No, you do not know that God exists through the fine-tuning of the universe. You assert that God exists based off your faulty understanding of the fine-tuning of the universe.
To the existence of free agency in this apparent deterministic universe.
There's so many fallacies here, I don't even know where to begin. Parts in the whole fallacy, for one, comes to mind. Certain things might be deterministic and other things might not be deterministic. Or it may be that free agency is a complete illusion, but you haven't proven free agency anyways, and even if you did, then you still have to show that that somehow proves God, and you haven't done that, and you haven't proven God anyways. So that also doesn't show anything at all.
Romans 2 shows that we know the moral law that has been written on our heart, which means conscience.
And the lobsters clearly states that turtles are evil and vile. Who cares? In the Spider-Man comics, Peter Parker gets his powers from a radioactive spider bite. And? So what? Who cares? That's nothing. It doesn't matter what your stupid book claims. We need actual evidence. You're not giving us that. You're saying, well, it says this. That's another claim that you now have to support. You have to show that that's true, that we should care one bit what your stupid book says. We don't. This isn't proof. As far as things being written on our heart, there's nothing written on that particular organ. Well, that's supposed to be poetic. Yeah, well, then it should be written clearly and concisely. But when you look at other cultures and other times, it's pretty darn clear that people have had different morals throughout ages. Are they simply ignoring what's written on their heart? Apparently so. Well, what is written on their heart? Well, what it says in the Bible to do. But then people don't necessarily do that. What then? Well, they're just ignoring the thing that's written on their heart. So you have absolutely no way to verify that it is indeed written on their heart. So there's another thing that you have failed to prove at all, even a little. Try something, do something, give me something here.
This is what we call general revelation, that everyone has sufficient understanding that God exists.
There are thousands upon thousands of people that do not think that there is a God. Let alone there's plenty of people that think a different God exists, and not your particular version of your particular God. What happened there? I guess it wasn't clear to them which God is the actual God, and as far as the other people, it certainly doesn't seem clear to them either. So this is an empty, vacant claim that's completely and wholly wrong and doesn't prove anything other than that your magical, mystical, holy book is also wrong about this. How about some actual evidence?
God judges all Gentiles on how much of this knowledge they have and how they respond to it.
You don't have any proof of that. I don't care what you believe. I want proof. You don't have any proof yet. Where's your proof? This doesn't answer why God is hidden at all. You're just asserting that God isn't hidden. But it is. So what's the deal here?
All the arguments and evidence presented by natural theology sufficiently justify the claim that God is not hidden.
You mean all the arguments that contain multiple logical fallacies? Those justify that God isn't hidden? So then the response should have been, I can't answer your question, God actually isn't hidden. And here's how I know. Which you don't know, you just believe and assert because you're simply referring back to the Bible. And then these other broken arguments that I've already pointed out in multiple ways that are broken and that others have already shown to be broken. So no, it's not sufficient. It's good enough for you, but it's not good enough for me. And it's certainly not good enough for any other non-believer.
The second thing to keep in mind would be the fact that this question seems to be striking more towards the idea of special revelation. This means that God would reveal to us who He is and intervenes in the lives of humans. In the Christian worldview, God has done this through the life of Jesus of Nazareth.
No, the question is just asking why God is so hidden. If God supposedly did something in the past, God still remains hidden today, and would have to do something today for me to be able to verify that it is indeed a thing at all. Since God has not done anything that I can empirically observe or test, then I am warranted in saying that there's no proof of God. It's simply still hidden for whatever silly reason. Jesus supposedly came back to life. Why didn't He just remain on earth talking to people, convincing them that yes, He is God and or God's Son, and this is how to worship and obey God, etc., etc. Having an immortal being among us would certainly cause us to think that God is a thing, I would think. I mean, well, they would just kill him again. So what? He'd just come back to life, or he wouldn't let them kill him. They wouldn't be able to come at him. He could just become non-physical in that moment, and their weapons go right through him or something. There's all sorts of ways that God could have made it so that it's abundantly clear that God exists. But Jesus, if he even was a thing, was in one little tiny part of the world in a limited amount of time where only a few people got to see and hear what he did, relying wholly and solely upon word of mouth to carry that message to the rest of the world. That is not convincing. And that is exactly how every other religion pretty much operates. Every god works essentially the same way to spread its message, through humanity, not through divinity.
If Christ was who he claimed to be, then God has revealed himself to humanity and explained himself.
That's a claim that a book that you haven't shown to be true makes. If there's a God, then there's a God. You could just say that. Circular reasoning.
The case for the resurrection is strong. The existence of Jesus and what he said is strong.
No, to both of those things. They're not strong. They're absolutely weak and laughable, actually. Full of logical fallacies, among them being all sorts of special pleading and the reliance upon humans to have transmitted this story that those humans wouldn't just, I don't know, change or alter things to fit their own personal narratives or the narrative or zeitgeist of the group at the time. Yeah, sure, right. How do we know that this Jesus fellow just wasn't a popular person that died, and that's the end of the story, but the followers didn't want him to be dead? They hired somebody to write that he didn't die, making up the story in full. The disciples were long dead once the copies started appearing that we actually have, right? So who's to stop those people? And many of those fragments are questionable or incomplete, and then there's verses and texts and things that are referenced that we don't have, and that doesn't even go into what is or what isn't canon and how we decide what is or isn't canon in the first place. All of that is questionable and suspect to its core. This is the best that God can do. Kind of a dumb God, to be honest. It puts itself in the past in a single place where illiteracy is rampant, relying completely on fallible humans to deliver its message to the rest of the world slowly, without bothering to explain to them not to use violence to do that. A message that is not universal, as many humans have rejected, and many humans do not accept that it happened because they weren't there to verify any of the events because they didn't see them. Oh, but this friend of my friend of the friend of the friend that I knew this guy once, he saw it. That's nice. Yeah, I don't think so. It's not good enough.
And the evidence for the early church preserving the case is strong as well.
Yeah, the early Church of Mormonism preserved the story of Joseph Smith. And? What's your point? The early Church of Scientology preserved the works of Ron Hubbard. What's your point?
Plenty for a rational belief that Christianity is true.
No, it's not. And also it doesn't resolve the question of why God is hidden.
The final thing to keep in mind is some people will never be convinced, no matter the amount of evidence.
Irrelevant, even if true. Well, even if I proved that this was true, you might not believe it. Maybe, but why not just prove that it's true? In fact, that question made me look for the evidence. You know what I found out? There wasn't any. That's why I deconverted. But I was honest in my journey. You, an apologist, don't need to be honest in your journey. You need to simply find things that reaffirm the thing that you believe to be true so that you can keep telling yourself that it is true and keep presenting the same broken arguments over and over again, keep dodging the questions and keep dodging the skeptics, and finally, if all else fails, simply go silent upon them for years at a time so that they maybe will give up on you and not do an entire video series blowing you out of the water and showing you for the con man that you actually are. What was I saying again? Oh, right. Also, you're wrong and you haven't proven anything.
Some people neglect that the experience the disciples had were just hallucinations.
I don't care what happened to the disciples at all. Not even a little. Nor can I know that anything that they said that happened did happen. It wasn't them writing down what written account we have anyways. So it just doesn't matter. And even if it was them, you can still make up shit. I know, it's amazing. You can just make up stuff and put it down, and people will believe your story if you're convincing enough. That's not evidence.
But then the evidence they want is a Damascus Road experience in order to believe.
Actually, for me, no, that wouldn't be enough. God has to reveal itself to all of humanity all at the same time, so that I can know that it's not a hallucination that I'm undertaking. But why wouldn't God give us all that at the same time? Oh, because God is hidden. Oh, you want this thing? That's not fair. Well, why did this guy get it? Why did he get that revelation? Well, he didn't. He made up that story to make himself be an authority so that he could then just dictate what he wanted the church to do and not do. That's plausible, isn't it? Paul, the first apologist ever to walk the earth. Okay, not the first apologist to walk the earth, because there was apologists before him. The first Christian apologist. No, well, that's not right either.
Is there not a contradiction here? Your epistemology requires that you need direct experience of God via special revelation.
Well, no, I don't, and now you're just assuming what my epistemology is. It's a simple question. Why isn't there freaking evidence for God? Why is it so dang hidden? There is evidence for God. And then you go on to present no evidence for God. See all these things that I'm claiming that are evidence, that are actually evidence? Ah, that's all evidence of God. You know that there's a God. Ha ha ha. It says in the Bible there's a God. Blah. No, that's evidence of God. Well, but you want something that's not fair. You want proof. That's not fair.
But we'll neglect any sort of experience like this as hallucinations or delusions.
Not necessarily. God could tell me in detail the solution to a mathematical problem that's been unsolved for many years that offers a significant prize money for solving it. And how to submit that paper for proper review. Upon submitting it, then I would indeed believe that it was God who had appeared to me and talked to me, because that is not knowledge that I personally possess. So I would then have to believe that somehow I was able to know how to submit a paper like that and what the solution to this math problem that I never knew anything about was. That's too many things for me to believe. So God certainly could come up with something clever enough to tell me during my personal revelation that would convince me that it is indeed God. Although I would want more than just a personal revelation, God could do that, and it would be able to convince me that it's actually God. But God hasn't done that. So I don't believe in it. And God also hasn't done it, as far as I can tell, for anybody ever in the entire course of human history. Although some people claim that God has shown up and told them many things about himself, or herself, or itself, why should I believe a mere mortal? Where's God? He's up on top of that mountain that nobody but me is allowed to climb up. Sure he is.
God knows who would not believe with any amount of evidence that is given.
And yet God creates those people and or allows them to be created knowing full well that nothing would convince them. And then they will be subject to hellfire because they didn't believe, even though they were never going to believe no matter what God did or didn't do. So it's totally, completely God's fault that they're landing in jail forever and ever and ever. Yeah. Sounds pretty stupid to me. Your God is a moron. Luckily, it doesn't exist.
So he doesn't reveal himself to those who would not believe.
Well, that's really convenient, isn't it? Well, of course I can do magic, but if I showed you that I could do magic, you're not going to believe that it's actually magic. You have to first believe in magic, then I can show you that I do magic. You have to believe first. I'm not going to do magic for people that don't believe in magic. That would be silly. Incoherent nonsense. How about actual proof? That would be nice. No? You don't got that, JMD wolves? Oh, okay.
Even with the evidence they required. Even if God were to give proof of his existence, some would not follow him or believe in him. Why is this?
Because of the nature of humanity, broadly speaking. If there was a God from the very start, it started out showing itself to some humans at some point in time, and then decided to go into hiding for whatever reason, only revealing itself to a handful of humans along the way, humans that happen to also be Jewish. So it was only apparently revealing itself to a handful of humans in a very select part of the world after millions and millions of years had already passed. The rest of the humans were completely unaware of God, because if we're going to agree with Judaism/Christianity, then God is not revealing itself to those people other than in a general, generic way where they just know that God exists because. But God's only limiting revealing itself to certain people and doing miracles for certain people in certain events at certain times because of reasons. Because of course it does. So, while the ark is being carried and those that carry it are unable to be beaten, meanwhile in other parts of the world nobody knows that that's going on, so nobody knows that the real God is doing all sorts of cool stuff. Not knowing anything about that God, they must now rely on general revelation to save them when they die. If they don't believe in God because they didn't see a God, well, of course, God knew that they weren't going to believe no matter what evidence he gave them anyways, so he goes ahead and lets them die, and I guess they go to hell. Also, Jesus wasn't around yet to forgive all sins, so I'm pretty sure until Jesus showed up, I guess everybody that died just went to hell. I don't know how it's supposed to work anymore, nor do I care, because it's just a story and myth, and you haven't proven anything. This God is a moron. Now, if it was something that we started off knowing was a thing, like, I don't know, the sun, that was blatantly evident to all of us that we could observe, interact with to some degree, talk to, get to know, then, yeah, I don't think that there's any reason why humanity would doubt it, given that it supposedly knows enough about us to make its existence something clear that we wouldn't doubt anymore because it's God and it could do that. As far as following it, that's a whole different story. Depends if God's a jerk or not. If God's a real asshole, no, you're not going to follow it. If God turned out to be Hitler, would you follow Hitler? Just because it was God? Yes or no? You might say, well, that's absurd. God isn't Hitler. How do you know? What if Hitler turned out to be God? It's a real jerk. Well, you're not going to follow it, so it's not going to reveal itself to you. Which is completely and utterly unfalsifiable and basically makes it something that you can't verify or prove at all. Which then does prove that, yes, it is still hidden then. Oh well.
People have idols in their life that they do not realize, but would value that above God because they have already derived meaning from that idol.
Irrelevant, even if true, because God still hasn't proven that it exists to, I dare say, most of humanity. The last time I checked, Christianity was a mere 33% of humanity. So God really sucks at this thing.
People are already worshipping secular gods and material things that they have basically called God in their life.
Well, there's another assertion that you would have to prove. I don't have anything that I call God in my life. At all. Other than as a joke. So, no. You're wrong.
For some people, pride is their God. No matter what you say, their mind will not change.
Well, then I guess pride is your God then, JMD. Wolves does apologetics. There you go. We've found what your God is. It's pride. No matter what anyone says, you're going to keep believing in your own version of God, and you have plenty of defenses for it ready to go. Why? Because you don't want to stop believing in it. Why? Because you're prideful. Is that an empty assertion? Yes, it is.
If this is the case, then there would be no reason for God to reveal himself to all people.
That's stupid. At every conceivable level that I can think of, that's just stupid. Of course God's not going to reveal itself, because you already have something that you call God, and you have too much pride, yada yada yada, and this and that, and the any excuse that you can think of, other than actually saying why God doesn't show itself. I mean, these are just things that you've made up, or these aren't. It doesn't really answer the question, does it? But that's a recurring theme in this series, so I'm not surprised at all.
But rather the ones who would believe and worship him as God truly. One more thing to note is that God is not required to reveal himself to anyone, but rather is sovereign in his revelation. However, he has given evidence for his existence and who he is through the special revelation of Jesus Christ for those who seek him daily.
No, it hasn't, and no, that's not how things work. If you try to believe in something every single day, you might actually trick yourself into believing it. But that's not empirical methodology, nor is it testable at all. It's just wish fulfillment. Your reason for why God is so hidden is about what I expected, to be honest. It's underwhelming amount of non-evidence and bad arguments. This playlist no longer exists. In fact, this YouTube channel no longer exists. This website no longer exists. JMD / Wolves Do Apologetics / John Dunphy is gone from this platform. I do not know why, but wherever he is, I wish him and his nothing but the best. May logic, reason, and science prevail in his life.